Thank you, Dr. Morales, for putting this together. So the purpose of today's event is to really explore the concept of mindset and how it applies to our specific disciplines, our units, and more specifically our practices both inside and outside of the classroom. So some of the goals for today. The first is to really increase our awareness about mindset. It's a very, very popular book. I went to Barnes & Noble's to buy my copy before we got free copies, and the lady at the checkout counter said that they're selling these books like crazy. Like, it's a really popular book. So I think we're really onto something, like Dr. Morales mentioned. Again, to continue the conversation that Dr. Nutt has started, to do some self-reflection. So I think some of this work gives us a chance to think about ourselves and how it applies to our specific context, whether it's in the class, whether it's working with students, and also whether it's working with additional faculty and staff. And then to do some application, so to use this as a springboard for other things that we can do around the campus. Two things that I want to point out that are extremely important. This is our disclaimer. This is for myself and also for the panel. We are not mindset experts, so we have been introduced to this concept maybe a week or two before you all, but we are not experts in the work of mindset, but just really looking to explore it in more detail. And the last piece is that this is really designed to be productive, right? I use the word productive. I think that it's okay to bring in some constructive feedback, but we're really focusing on how can we take this work and again apply it into our areas and do some great things, because I think Khan Academy is kind of latching onto this. So I think Khan Academy is the free online education. He posted an article about using this in his work, which is huge. So I talked with Dr. Nutt earlier, and she really believes that we're onto something, specifically at the community college level. So it's great that we're starting this talk now. So the format for today, everybody should have a handout which kind of walks through mindset, both the fixed and growth mindset. We're going to watch a couple of videos in a moment, and then our prestigious panel is going to come and just share some of their thoughts about how they plan to apply this in their classroom and in their work areas, or how they have applied it already. And then you all will get a chance to chime in, and I have a few questions that we'll talk through just to think about, again, how can we make this more useful on our campus. And then we'll close with, so what's next? I think that one of the things that's really important when we have a session like this is that we leave with some action items. Now, we have not been required to do anything. So Dr. Morales, neither Dr. Nutt has said when you all leave you have to do something, but I think that it's useful for us to make this time valuable and to come up with some action items and things that we could do to really explore this further. So any questions about the format for today's conversation? All right, so we will start with, everybody again should have a copy of the handout. I'm not going to walk through the handout, but it does a really good job of explaining kind of the basic concepts of Carol Dweck's work on mindset, right? The difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. There's a 1-minute video clip that we're going to start with, and then we'll dig right into a little bit more detailed talk by Carol Dweck about, or not by her, but really digging into some of her work in a little bit more detail after this initial talk. So let's get started with our first video. Thank you, Jeff. So a quick overview of both the mindsets. Now we're going to shift into a little bit of a longer talk about Carol Dweck's work.
Carol Dweck is one of the world's leading researchers in the field of motivation, and she's the Lewis and Virginia Eaton Professor of Psychology at Stanford University in America. She focuses on why people succeed and how to foster that success, which is vital for teachers and for parents alike. She's written a book called Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, which has one very simple idea with profound impacts, and that's what I'd like to share with you today.
My research shows that we produce confident learners when we praise students for the process they engage in, not when we tell them they're smart or talented. And my research shows that when we encourage a growth mindset in students, they become enthusiastic learners and responsible ones too. A growth mindset means they believe that their intelligence can be developed. And I talk about programs where we've taught this to students and shown remarkable changes in their motivation and their achievement.
The Greater Good Science Centre has a fantastic series on YouTube with Dr. Christine Carter and Kelly Corrigan talking about how to raise happy kids. These particular clips talk about Carol Dweck's idea of mindsets and how to use praise appropriately.
So there are two basic types of mindset. There's the fixed mindset, which is the belief that kids are born with whatever talents they're going to have. They have certain proclivities. They're gifted.
They're natural.
Their traits are set in stone, basically. And the growth mindset is the belief that success really comes from effort and practice and hard work.
So this is almost like nature versus nurture, right?
Yes, exactly. So the fixed mindset is the really strong belief in nature. And the growth mindset places much more emphasis on effort and hard work to get where you want to go and to be successful. But here's the problem with the fixed mindset. When you label Georgia as a smart girl or something,
Which I've only told her about 1,000 times.
Yeah, I know. I say to my kids, "You're brilliant. You're a genius." You know, I mean, I think it's very natural to do this. But here's the problem: you give them that label, and it kind of puffs them up a little bit, and they like it, and then they don't want to lose it. So she's going to go out in the world, starting to evaluate situations and what she does in terms of whether or not she's going to look smart, whether or not she's going to win or lose. It's going to start to become a little bit of an insecurity for her. She's going to always be wanting
to prove it.
Right. So what happens when something doesn't come naturally to them? They have to put a little effort out for it. Does that mean they're dumb? Does that mean they're not innately talented?
Right.
So then they start to look at the world in terms of situations. Am I going to look smart in that situation?
Right. It's why the kids don't take hard classes. It also just pulls all the control away, because if you think that the reason why you did well on the test is because you're so smart,
right,
and then you do poorly on a test,
right,
then what does that mean? That you're no longer smart? Right. Whereas if you're giving all the credit to effort and studying and time on task and going to getting extra help from the teacher,
right,
then you know how to create the outcome that you're driving for.
That's exactly right. The top thing really is effort. So Tiger Woods may have been born a good golfer. We don't really know that. What we do know is he started playing when he was 3 and he's practiced every day since. The other really great reason why is because kids who have growth mindsets are going to enjoy themselves more. They're going to like their activities. They're going to love learning more. They're going to learn to embrace challenges. Growth mindsets are a real key to having a happy childhood.
So fixed mindset is a recipe for sort of joyless achievement, whereas growth mindset
is a great recipe for a happy childhood. Just because you're focused on effort and process instead of outcome and achievement doesn't mean that they're going to be less successful. In fact, focusing on effort and practice will lead to greater success in whatever they're doing. When you change that mindset, performance also usually follows. And moreover, they are going to enjoy themselves more and lead happier lives because of it. Let me tell you about this really fascinating study that has been replicated several times. Carol Dweck
the mindset lady.
Yes, the mindset lady has been going into schools and giving kids a simple test. And all the kids do pretty well on it. But then she divides them into groups. And some kids, she gives them one line of praise. All the kids, she's going to give one line of praise. Some kids, she praises their intellect. She says,
"You're so smart.
You did great on this test. You must be really smart." Which is very similar to the praise that Georgia is
you're
getting.
A good artist.
You're a good artist. And the other kids, she said, "You did really well on this. You must have tried really hard."
Right.
So what's really interesting about this is just how incredibly powerful that one line was. So then she went back to the kids and she said, "All right, you can do the same simple test or you can do a harder one, which you might learn from."
And all the You're So Smart kids started sweating profusely and having panic attacks.
And they took the simpler test. The majority of the You're So Smart kids.
They kept drawing the flower.
Right,
So
they kept drawing the flower. But in one study, 90% of the effort-praised kids took the harder test, which is really a remarkable result.
Right, because it's not about the outcome for them.
Right, that's exactly right. So what we're saying here is not that you shouldn't praise your kids.
Right.
We're saying you need to praise them in a really specific way. So the effort-praised kids, they reported having more fun on these tests, even when they weren't doing as well.
Right.
They wanted to take problems home to practice.
But You're So Smart kids don't want to take it home and practice because they don't need to practice because they're so smart.
Right. Effort
and
means...
if they do have to practice, then that means maybe they're not so smart.
Right. Well, and another thing that I think is really compelling is that the effort-praised kids, they liked the harder problems better than the easier ones, which is so great because that's how you get better at something. You keep challenging yourself.
Right.
So this simple study shows how profoundly praise influenced not just how well kids did, because
but what it feels like.
Right, and what it feels like, and the fun that they were having. Who
Right.
loved learning versus whose intellectual confidence was a little bit shaken, who got a little nervous,
Right.
who started to not do as well on a simple test.
Right, because it's your whole attitude about effort. Either effort is a threatening thing because you shouldn't have to work so hard because you're so smart.
Right.
Or effort is the experience.
Right.
Effort is the joy. The joy is learning how to do something for the first time, trying hard, being challenged.
Right. So praise is very powerful.
So it's almost like you need to have in your back pocket a big pile of questions that are growth mindset questions versus saying like, how was your game? Did you win?
Right.
It's how was your game? Did you have fun?
Did you learn something new? Did all that practice pay off?
It is so hard to stop yourself from saying, did you win?
Yeah.
Did you score? Did you get an A?
I think the message is it doesn't matter whether or not you're good at it. Are you having fun? That's the relevant thing. Are you learning something?
You can't keep up with this changing world if you can't grow and can't learn. So that's one very important application. But the other is you can't be a mentor, a good mentor, without having a growth mindset. And so it tells you how one group is really going around the world curious to learn, and the other is going around the world wanting to feel smart. When it comes to your brain, don't lock down. Keep those neurons connecting.
All right, I'm going to invite our panelists up, and while they are coming, I think it's done. I'm going to invite our panelists up to have a seat, and while they're coming up, just want to open the. And I'm going to invite our panelists up, and while they are walking up, I just wanted to kind of open the floor, just and any initial thoughts you all had about the video that you'd like to share before we get into some very specific discussion about their experience with fixed mindset versus growth mindset. So we need initial thoughts from our audience.
Well, I was just thinking some of the statements you made, and I know these workshops are set up to help all of us, including the faculty. And it would be great if the faculty could just, maybe interject one of these statements, with the students, praise them for their efforts or show them the difference between the fixed and the growth mindset. I think that would be very helpful.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
Well, my thought is they're talking about little kids, I'm assuming, with younger children. So when we're dealing with so-called adults who are in college, they've already got internalized that whole aspect of what you just discussed.
Right.
So then what do we do with it here?
Good question. So you didn't hear. So this video talked about children, but for some of our students who are, have been through life and have a pretty standard set mindset. So how do we fix that? How do we change it? How do we modify it? How do we interject something to help them to think differently about themselves and their abilities? Yes.
I'll dovetail into that, just in that in my role, I will see students from the get-go, their first concept, their first imagination, their first thought of ever going to college. And if at that point, even if it's something like filling out the application, which sometimes can be very challenging,
Right.
to say, wow, you're really working hard at this, we're gonna figure this out, that kind of thing, that the whole process, even starting then, if that plants a seed in their minds that college is a place where people work through things, whether it's the application, whether it's the FAFSA, whether it's whatever forms or check boxes who they have to meet with and all that, if it's done in that sort of an approach, that this process is so worth it and you're so awesome at it, maybe even though it is ingrained from the first 18 years or longer, however this may be, maybe that at least opens their eyes to that sort of a culture in this institution.
I agree. So it's really the value of every single experience, every single touch, whether it's filling out the application, whether it's the first person you meet on campus, whether it's the first conversation you have with somebody and let them know how challenging this experience is. I agree. I think that we all play a part. Faculty, staff, administration, grounds, everybody plays a part in helping students to change their mindset. Yes?
I think that there's a lot of growth that happens in the early years of adulthood. And so I don't think it's too late. I think that, of course, there's obstacles to overcome, but I think that they still can be influenced maybe or taught at this point in time.
So I can, so one of the things that I talk about in my class is I teach a class on identity, and I use Arthur Chickeren's 7 vectors of identity development. I focus on this whole idea of developing identity. So for the 18 to 20-year-olds, and I think this even applies to some of our non-traditional students, part of this experience, part of going to college is helping them to figure out who they are. And I think that this work helps us to help them get there. So am I, what are the pieces of me that make me me? Is it that I identify as being a father, or I identify as being a student, or Mr. Johnson uses the word scholar a lot, right? So just some of the conversations that we have help students to really figure out who they are. Like, I'm Jackie, and I am a first-time in college student, and I am a father, and those things are important to me, and those things make up who I am, and I think we all play a part in helping those students to figure out who they are and how they're going to get through this experience. All right, so I'm going to open the floor. Thank you for interjecting and for sharing. So I'm going to open the floor up to our panelists. We're just going to start over here with Dr. Piercy. We'll work our way around. If you would just, you're to my left. I'm sorry, this is what happens when you sit there. I can't ask the coffee cup to start.
Toya's on her way down, so we can start with her.
We could. Come on down, Professor Hartman. You want him to let
Nate gets the date.
Okay. So we're going to actually start with Professor Hartman, who's going to take the spot. Yeah, to my immediate left.
I was in class.
No, and we are so glad that you were here.
So what are you asking me?
So we're just going to we'll do a quick introduction. So we'll start with Professor Hartman, work our way around, and we'll come back to Professor Hartman to get us kicked off and talking a little bit about how she either uses or experiences this type of mindset in her class. So we'll start with you and we'll move around.
So I am Professor LaToya Hardman, and I am a new EDUC instructor. I will be starting the AAT program back here at Tomball. I currently teach EDUC 1300, and I have taught DS English for the past 7 years.
And I'm Dan Piercy. I teach English here at the college. I started here in 2002, and I've been teaching since '89. So.
I'm Ava Vaselis. I teach English here. I think I've been here 5 years. I think 5 years teaching English.
I'm Vanessa Gilbert Cronin, and I teach sociology, and I've been here a long time too. Adjunct for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Shannon Reno. I'm with Student Life, and I've been here for 10 years.
I'm David Birch. I came here in 2002 as well. I teach government and politics, and I'm one of the 2 Model UN advisors here at LSC-Tomball.
And I'm Morgan Sook. I'm with the TRIO Student Support Services Program, and I've been here a little over a year, so fairly new.
So one thing I do want to point out is just kind of the diversity in our panel, because again, this is more than just a faculty issue, this is more than just a staff issue, but it spans across all disciplines, all functions, so I'm glad that we have a very diverse group here. So we'll start with Professor Hardman, just kind of talking a little bit about how you apply or how you experience this type of mindset in your class.
So I have all these thoughts. I'm going to try to put them in some sort of coherent response to that. But teaching developmental English, because that's what I've taught the longest, you definitely have students who have a fixed mindset. And you have two different fixed mindsets in my classroom. The primary one is I'm not a good writer, right? So they come into class not believing that they write well. The other group are the students who think they are good writers because someone has told them that, and as a result, they don't want to listen to anything that I have to tell them, right? So I will give them specific instructions, but they know what it means to write, therefore, they kind of just don't listen to anything that I have to offer. So I guess one of the things that I try to do in my classroom, and it's in whether I'm teaching EDUC or DS English or when I start teaching teachers, is I try to, most of our students come into our classes with a fixed mindset about what we are going to teach them, right? So they believe that in a writing class, this is what they are going to learn. Or in an EDUC class, they have very fixed mindsets about what it is that they are going to learn. So I feel that it's my job to help them have a growth mindset about what it means to be a learner, right? So just because you're in an English class does not mean that we won't look at sociology, or we won't look at art, or we won't look at mathematics, right? We are going to approach English in a very different way because I want them to understand that I'm trying to give you skills that are transferable and that you can use them in any one of your courses. I feel the most successful when students come back to me and say, I had one this summer, oh, I applied this to my history class. Or on my job, I've become a better employee because now I know how to use Microsoft Word, or I really know how to use Microsoft PowerPoint. So I'm helping them to develop a growth mindset about what it means to be a learner and what it means to be in an English class. The other thing that I have to do, I have to remind myself that I can't have a fixed mindset about my students. So when students come to me in developmental English, it would be very easy for me to think certain things about them. And if I have those fixed mindsets, then they will start believing them and they will start adhering to whatever it is that I believe about them. So students like to say, Professor Hartman, she is hard, man. And the reason why is because I try to push all of them. I don't accept that you're in developmental English and that's all you can do, right? I expect greatness out of all of my students. I expect that they are going to push themselves, that they're going to be thinkers. I am very excited when they come to me and they say they're in Dr. Piercy's class and they're getting an A or a B. Like, that makes me overjoyed because I know that they have gone from having fixed mindsets about who they are and what they can achieve, and they go into other classes and they are successful. So I don't know if I've said a whole lot, but I think that as instructors, we need to step away from the fixed mindsets that we have about our students and just expect that they can all reach the level that we expect of them and give them the tools that they need to get there.
I've been thinking about this for a while with, this last week or so, and I kept thinking of memes. And one of the things that came up in one of our discussions, we had that marathon week where we had, three COAT meetings that week. And one of the things that came up was just professors as models. And so that gave me a bit to reflect on, right? So I was thinking of the memes that made impact on me, and what I mean by that, right, are these little mind viruses that affect your behavior, right, and affect your thinking, and then filter in and just infect the entire system, and that includes stories, right? That includes stories. So I thought I'd share a few of these. They're just little bits of virus that I'm trying to implant here. So one is right from that there's a book from, I think it's from Good to Great, right? And he quotes somebody, a master musician, and how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, 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 right? Everybody's heard this one. There's also, my dad gave me a book by Coach Wooden, UCLA basketball coach. He's quoted, there's a section on him in the Dweck book. And you know, he wrote the book when it's late in life, and he's sort of reflecting back on having this great team with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, right? But UCLA, they were a championship team before he came on the team, and they were a championship team for at least 3 years after he came on the team, right? And one of his things was, and we've all heard this, I think, right? To do your best is success. And what's interesting is what's built into that, right? That's a long-term proposition. If you're always doing your best, right, you're stretching every time, right? But it also takes the pressure off of now. Just do your best, right? That's the kind of psychology of that. And it reminds me of another thing I heard when I was listening to a lecture at the business college, and the fella came in. He was talking to all these business students at Indiana University Bloomington. He said, when you go to your first job, you always do 110%. Why? Because you're going to screw up. And when you do, you don't want to be known as the screw up. You want to be known as the guy who always gives 110%. The point being, right, oh, well, that wasn't him. That's not him as a screw up. He's usually great. That was just a little blip on the radar. Right? So, also, I wrestled in high school and junior high. And early on in junior high, we had a coach who was really focused on fundamentals. And his thing was, we just drilled sit-outs and takedowns. And his thing was, you're never going to stay on the bottom, and you'll always have a chance of being on top, right? Well, that was a really good team. Okay, it was a really good. Those kids were drilled in that stuff. Also, story of my kids. My boys are kind of risk averse, and my daughter is not. She kind of faces. She just sort of runs into the world, and whatever happens. So my oldest son didn't learn to ride a bike until he was like 19. My daughter, 6 years old, no training wheels. She got on the bike, rode, fell down, hurt her knees. Got on the bike, rode, fell down, hurt her knees. Said, why are you gonna hurt you? I want to ride the bike. I want to be out there with the kid. And that's exactly, and she was right. Within a week, she was riding. It told me something about her spirit, which is interesting, right? She thinks she's the dumb one in the family, but she's the one that's going to achieve, right? Because she's the one that's got, right, the fight and the fire. Also, I had a friend who went to Amherst College for a fellowship one year, and he saw that it was the day before classes, late at night, he's walking around, the library is filled with students. He couldn't, what planet is this? The students are there before classes start. And it just made me think, well, yeah, they know the value of work. These are successful kids at a successful place, and they know that they're going to go somewhere if they put in the effort, right? I guess one last one is just an English professor I had at Santa Rosa Junior College, and I was pretty aimless youth, other than sports, but I struggled with focus and all that kind of stuff. And he said, just practice. It's just practice. Practice taking your notes. Practice being disciplined. Practice reading, right, without losing the thread, right? And that took a lot of the pressure off. This is just practice. This is just something to, right? This is just practice. So kind of keeping that kind of beginner's mind all the time.
So I teach a lot of English 1301 classes, and like LaToya and Van we've got students from all sorts of backgrounds and all sorts of ranges, so all sorts of abilities, and I've got students who are returning students or older students that, grouped in the same class as my homeschooled students who are 17 or 18. And what I've noticed with my different students with all these different backgrounds and coming from different places and different ages, they compare themselves to their peers. And I'll have students who will come to me and they'll turn in their paper to me and they'll say, I'm so sorry, I tried really, really hard, but I know this isn't any good. And then in the course of conversations, they'll say, so-and-so over here is obviously a really good writer, and I'll never be as good as this student over here. So it's occurred to me that one way of alleviating that for my students who aren't as confident about their writing, or the students who come in, guns blazing, I'm a good writer, and then they get their first paper back and they find out that they might not be quite as great of a writer as they think they are, is to focus on the process, is to focus on what they've learned through that process of writing. It's not just what is the product that you turned into me, but what have you learned through this week that we spent or 2 weeks that we spent writing. And they see that if they focus on process and if they really focus on this metacognitions, what is it that they've learned, that they aren't that there's no point in comparing themselves to their classmates. And I also spent some time comparing Faulkner and Hemingway. Look, here's Faulkner, he's one of America's greatest writers ever, and his writing style is completely different from Ernest Hemingway, another one of America's greatest writers ever. And if we compare these two amazing, phenomenal writers that were prolific and read over and over again today, we see that their end product is in no way the same. So the students can hopefully understand that their end product isn't necessarily going to be like their peers. I spent a lot of time talking about Faulkner and Hemingway and Tennessee Williams and the different processes that they went through, and we know from looking at their manuscripts that they didn't write that. Hemingway didn't write Old Man and the Sea in a day. He spent a long period of time writing it. Tennessee Williams, his Glass Menagerie was produced on Broadway, and everybody said this is the greatest play ever. He went and viewed his play as an audience member, and he didn't like the way some of the characters had been portrayed. And so he went back and rewrote that play, and it had already been considered something that was amazing. And so I stress that to my students over and over and over again, that the paper isn't done, it's due. And what I'm grading is what you've turned into me at that moment. I'm not saying that you're a bad writer. I'm not saying that this paper can't get better. What you've turned into me is, I'm grading what you've turned into me at that moment. So I spend a lot of time focusing on process. I spend a lot of time allowing the students the opportunity to revise the paper if they choose it, because again, it's not done, it's just due. And then I also spend some time focusing on this idea of effort, because we all have this. Students come in and they say, well, how dare you give me a D or an F on this paper? I put a lot of effort into the paper. Their definition of effort is very different sometimes from my definition of effort. Just because you sit in front of a computer for 2 hours doesn't mean you put forth a lot of effort. If you sit in front of the computer for 2 hours, maybe you also spend a lot of time on your phone. Maybe you got distracted over here. And we spent some time talking about, are you distracted? Do your kids run in and distract you? That's something you can't control. But are you distracted because you're on the phone? Are you distracted because you're on Facebook or whatever social media they're on? So then I also spend some time describing to them or discussing with them what effort means. And I think that if we spend some time defining for them our concepts so that in terms that they understand, then they can figure out how to use that in your class and then also transfer it to another class.
I'm learning a lot. Just listening to everybody. I had just started reading the book, and a lot of things struck me on this. And as a sociologist, fortunately, I'm kind of not. I don't have people enter my classroom with too much of a fixed mindset because they don't even know what they've signed up for. They don't know what sociology is. They think it's probably not psychology, but they're not really sure. So what's good about that is how I bring it on to them is important, I think, in the beginning. And some of the things I stress is what makes us different is the way that sociologists look at the world, which is everything is a part of it. And there's a natural curiosity to everything. And that kind of goes along with this growth mindset, which is kind of convenient, at least the way that I look at the world. That doesn't mean that's the way they look at the world, but I have a better option now, I think, kind of learning about this, about how I can take what I do and how I look at it and help enhance that. And I think one of them is revise and resubmit kinds of things. And I don't grade on their papers. I'm grading on content a lot because I'm having them do activities where they go out and they do something and then they have to reflect on. I keep always using the word reflection, calling upon what they already know, and then what does that compare to other things that they know, and try to make associations. And I think that I can take this that I'm learning and somehow make that better. I think I have a right idea, but I could do it deeper or cause them to maybe love learning more from that curiosity, that natural curiosity. So that's what I think I can do as a professor. As a sociologist, though, I see some really interesting implications for this in our world and the social problems that we have in the United States. If we take our educational system and how these students, how come they come so unprepared, or what appears to be unprepared for us is, I guess, their whole lifetime of experiencing a lot of this fixed mindset. When I think about, they drop your class because it's too hard, which happens a lot. That's why they rate you on the professor thing, because I got to get through here. Don't take her, God forbid. And because they want something easy, and they're not even ashamed of saying that. And I have many students. They're like, oh, I'm like, well, I understand if this isn't what you were wanting, like a D. Oh, thank God I got a D. I mean, I would have got killed if I came home with a D. So that's a whole mindset on how that all fits in, but it's got to tie in with how we've been raising our children. And I have 6 grown children, and I'm thinking about some of the things I said to them that makes me think, okay, I'm talking to my 1-year-old granddaughter on FaceTime the other day, and I'm thinking, I started to tell her, oh, aren't you pretty? And I was talking about pretty girl, and I'm like, oh my God, I gotta show because she's more than that. So I guess I don't talk about that at all. I haven't figured that out. I'm still reading the book. But I'm like, what do I say? It won't have anything to do with how she looks, I guess. I haven't figured that part out. But anyway, so this.
You made a good effort on your hair today.
That dress really, I don't know.
You shopped really
hard. But I don't know how this is going to apply, but I know that in some way I've contributed to that in the raising of my own kids. So that bothers me. I think this is applicable to family relationships, which is something else we study in sociology. Not just the parenting, too much parenting, like the helicopter thing, like parents doing their kids' work for them so that they can get the science fair A and all of that. I think it applies to relationships. This relationship's hard, so I'm going to bail out of it. This marriage is hard. I don't like you anymore. I don't love you anymore. How's that come out? I think it's media, the normative images of comparing themselves to people constantly, with our sports. In sports, in the one area, I'd almost want to think that practice makes sense. Like, whether they're natural or not, they still have to go practice, but still you look at the behaviors and the role models of those people after this week's scandals, in TV artists, just all the people that we value. And some people just want to be like that because they think that's the easier way to be. Or that's the only thing I can do. I'm only good at this one thing. I can play basketball or I can run, and then how that narrows them. And then she talks a little bit in the book, like I said, I haven't finished yet, but on race and ethnicity and gender, and then these internalizations of these ideas about what our society already said your limitations are before you ever get there, what your opportunities are to begin with. And so if we think about breaking down barriers and how we're going to do that, and we're trying, but if we're not changing a mindset, it's not going to work, because you really can't legislate people liking each other, even though that's what our society is trying to do. If we can take all these rules around, and I can smack you, make you in trouble, or put you in jail, or say you're a hater or whatever, but it doesn't change people's minds. So that's sociology, and so that's a lot of stuff. So anyways, that's what I've been thinking about.
Wow, that's really hard to follow.
Sorry.
That was good. No, that was good. So in student life, which is student organizations, student activities, our sports teams, and our leadership training, I think mindset, now again, Jennifer, we're not experts in this, but I believe that it runs absolutely throughout everything that I, within my department, do with the students. On a personal note, I'm trying to finish up a graduate degree, so modeling the way, somebody mentioned that earlier, I think. I mean, they'll hear me go in and check my grades, and I'm like, oh my God, I missed 1 point on that. I'll go back to my paper and look at it and I'll see what I missed wrong. Okay, and I'll talk about, how I can do that better. I'm not blaming anyone for it, but I'm looking at, okay, how can I do that? And I'm freak out over one single point, so, but I'm not blaming anybody, so hopefully I'm doing something good with them, that they're working hard to get that, the grade that they want, or working towards, because really, I put tons of time into it, so hopefully they'll see that. Anyway, another personal note, when you talked about your granddaughter, I have a 14-year-old, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been raising him wrong the entire time. You're not a genius, and you're not the best athlete in the world. I'm so sorry. I'm lying to you the whole time. But we're going to work really hard on that. And that's not entirely true.
I'm going to run with you.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, maybe not. But I'll hire you someone to do that. No, I'm kidding. But, and we haven't, that's an exaggeration, we haven't, but I find myself more and more saying, well, did you enjoy it? Did you do your best? Things like that. So I think that's really important, because the students that you all are talking about are the students that end up in a mixed group with me doing lots of different things. So we have lots of different personalities and backgrounds, and well, this needs to be on my time because it's really only thing that matters. And I'm like, well, whoa, you've got 27 other people in this group, and it's about their time too. So it's a challenge at times working through the mindsets that they come in with. And one of the things that we do at the beginning of the year each year is take them on a leadership retreat, and we go to a high and low ropes course. And that is a really good transformational process for students. If you have a chance to take your students on something like that, I mean, they have to, one example is they have to climb this skinny utility pole, and they stand on this little platform, but then their partner comes up and stands on the same thing, and there's tears, and it's challenge by choice, but they're really, really pushing themselves through this, and they have to jump off at the same time and grab this trapeze bar. And at the end of that, if they make it through, which most of them do, they feel like they can tackle the world. And all they did was climb a pole and jump. So that's been a really good experience for us that we try to give them, because most of them have never done anything like that before. Sports-wise, that there was a YouTube video. Does anybody see the video that came out this weekend about the young football player? He was an African-American football player, and he was a high school player, and he was so excited about his team's mindset. Has anybody seen that? It's so awesome, because he really, you have to go YouTube football player mindset. And Google that up, or whatever, not Google it, but look it up on YouTube. And he even uses the word mindset in his interview about how his team, they started off slow, but they're going to end fast, and he was just so excited about it. And so if we can get our students through organizations and sports teams to have that type of mindset, they can tackle the world. They can do anything. They can have a good attitude when they go into government, when they go into sociology. So that's kind of where I see us fitting in and supporting this whole thing within the classroom. Our sports program, like I was trying to say a second ago, I mean, they work hard, they practice. This is not Division I sports. This isn't Division III sports. This is a club sport. They practice multiple times per week, and they play a game on Fridays, I think. Same thing with volleyball. We have volleyball and basketball and soccer, and they put the time into it. And at the end, they didn't get the outcome they wanted. The coaches go back through them, obviously, and they work on those areas. So sports is a really good relationship, I think, with the mindset. Student organizations is another area. When we do events and programs like the Student Activities Board, they're in charge, they're deciding what to do, but in the end, if the outcome is not what they wanted it to be, and I'm not going to use the word successful on purpose, then we go back and evaluate that, because it's okay if it wasn't successful, but what can we do differently next time? And we evaluate that. They talk about it. It's not a personal thing. I'm not criticizing you if I said, X, Y, and Z didn't work well. That's just something we need to learn from. So as a novice to mindset, that's kind of how I see where we are and what we do and how it supports their classroom activities.
I've just been looking. I wish Darrell was here. Most of you know Darrell Forte, right? And I wish Darrell was here. And if his ears are burning, that's fine, because I'm about to talk about Darrell. I'm a social scientist, and I don't really want to talk so much about my classes as about Model UN, and as the advisor to Model UN. and about the students that go through that process, spend the week in New York City, and then get back on the plane coming back to Texas. Among those are folks like Darrell, who've basically never been out of the state of Texas, never been on an airplane, and who are willing to take a leap of faith that most of our students are pre-programmed not to take. So what Professor Frederis was, when her comment a little while ago started me down this road, we don't teach students in a vacuum. I mean, you got to put it into a context, and the context is our society, and our society creates this culture of dysfunctional success that's black and white, either or, winners and losers, and if you lose, the rest of us we get to keep score, and we get to dance on your grave, basically. So, I mean, they come into the Lone Star College Tomball program with a mindset of kind of a warped view of success, and it's all focused on challenges. Either you pass the challenge or you fail the challenge. And it's this laundry list of things that they have to check off, little things that they check off. And this equals success. And in the end, when you start to ask students questions about their challenges and how they go about looking at life, they're seeing it in the societal context that allows for just extraordinarily dysfunctional things to happen. Back in 2006, a climber named David Sharp was in an expedition climbing Mount Everest. And Sharp got lost on the way up Mount Everest. And following him was another expedition up the mountain. And the other expedition passed Sharp. So they knew where he was. And they walked by this man, watching him die as they walked by, because they were so fixated on scaling Mount Everest and reaching the top that they basically just left him there. And not only did they leave him there on the way up, they left him there on the way down as well. So, yeah, that's what I said too. So our students, our students are already entrapped in this mindset. So when I take, and Professor Tiffy and I take 4 or 6 students and combine them with 6 students from Montgomery and 4 or 6 students from Kingwood, and we sit them down in a group and we say, okay, you guys have applied to go to New York City to compete against 6,000 students from all over the world. Most of them are going to be senior undergraduates at universities. Some will be graduate students. And oh, by the way, some are going to be PhD students. And here you are, first-year student or a dual credit student, and good luck to you. And they kind of look at you, some of them do with this, oh no, I don't think so. And those are the ones that immediately back out the door. I mean, we lose them within 30 seconds. And the ones that stay are the ones that look at this and go, what's this sounds like? This sounds like fun. This is a pretty damn cool thing. And they look at it as an opportunity. Well, cool, I've never seen a graduate student before. I don't know what they do. Let's go meet a graduate student. So off they go to New York City. like Darrell, never been on a plane before, with a complete attitude of, I'm going to take a leap of faith, and you know, what's the worst that could happen? I fall off the pole and, you know, oh well, and, you know, I'm going to live kind of thing. And invariably, at the end of this, this conference has 3 principal awards. And invariably, we come back with one of those 3 awards. And we tell the students, it's not the reward. Don't focus on the reward. Focus on the experience. Focus on the opportunity that you have. And whatever happens after that is whatever happens. And, you know, it's not that big a deal. But invariably, they go into it, they immerse themselves into it. They may sleep 4 hours a night because they're working basically around the clock, and they want to do this. I mean, they don't want to go to sleep because they want to experience the whole week. So when they get back on the plane, they're dead. But they come back with an award. So, and the graduate students, we tell them, okay, don't tell anybody you're a community college student. Just go in, do your best. And the graduate students, by about Wednesday, starts on a Sunday, about Wednesday, they figure out, okay, I am now working with a community college student who's 17 years old and is actually a dual credit student still in high school. And their mindset gets immediately altered. And it's this really cool reorientation of the whole environment that these kids are in. It's just a great thing. And the unfortunate part of it is it's so damn difficult to reorient in a society that favors dysfunctional rewards.
So in the TRIO Student Support Services Program, we are federally grant funded, and we work with a special group of students. We serve 140 that have certain obstacles. In order to be a member of our program, you have to be either a first-generation college student, you have to have a documented disability, or you have to be eligible to receive a federal Pell Grant, which typically means that you are low income. So I would say about 90% of our students automatically come in with a fixed mindset, like a lot of the other panelists have already mentioned, because either A, I don't have a lot of money, B, no one in my family went to college, so I don't have anybody to talk to, I don't have anybody to get feedback, I don't have anyone to guide me through this process, so essentially I'm alone. Or if they have some type of documented disability, which can be a learning disability, but can also be mental issues, it can be physical disabilities. So a lot of times they've been dealing with that their entire life. And when they get here, they've always heard like, well, this is your situation and deal with it. And no matter what you do, you're always going to have this disability, or you may, the potential of you not ever breaking out of the low income status is low, or you're always going to not have a adequate support system. So many of them are just very lost, and they automatically think that, okay, I'm just here because I don't have anything else to do. I don't really expect to graduate. I don't really expect to get any better than what I already am. So our whole goal is to definitely try to change that. One of the ways that we do that is we started utilizing Gallup Strength Quest. And so we've been doing that for a little over a year and a half now. And they take this assessment, and they're given their top 5 strengths. And it's out of 34 possible ones that they can. And a lot of the feedback that I get from the students is the very first time that anyone has told them that or shed light on the positive attributes that they have. They've always been focused on, this is what's wrong with you, this is what you need to do to get better, just the bad. And this is the first time they're coming from a positive standpoint. They say, okay, well, maybe I am good at something. Maybe I can break these barriers. Maybe I can actually be successful. So we give that to all of our students, and we also do a course of workshops throughout the semester that are geared towards them. We give them binders, we give them little cards, and we constantly inundate them to remind them that, look, you do have positive attributes, and if you can just kind of turn that crystal and go from looking at it from this particular angle and kind of turn it around and let the light hit it in a different way, and all of a sudden you see something that you've never seen before. Another thing that we do, we implement what we call an ESP, an Educational Success Plan, and we customize it. So we have them to go check out all this information on what they feel like their specific needs are for this particular semester. But the main thing that we do is we have them to set goals every semester. And we say, of course, okay, you want to pass your classes, but in addition to that, what also do you want to accomplish? And then what we have them do is say, okay, this is what you said you wanted to do. Well, how do you plan on achieving that? And well, I don't know. I mean, I'm just gonna do it, you know. And they never really have a plan of action, really. So we spend a lot of time getting them to kind of get into that growth mindset, because so many of them don't think that it's actually going to happen, and just providing them with different outlets and different options to say, okay, well, if you want to make A's in your classes, or if you want to get into the nursing program, or if it may be something as simple as I want to manage my time better, or I want to be able to get to class on time. You know, so we try to implement different strategies for them that are catered towards certain situations that only they really inquire. Another thing that we get a lot of our students, when they do accomplish something, they finally pass their math test, or they finally got an A on their English paper that they've been struggling so hard with, we always try to reflect back and say, okay, yes, congratulations, you know, yay, good for you, but what did you learn throughout that process? Like, what did you do differently this time when you got an A, or maybe just a 75 and you passed it, that you hadn't been doing previously when you were failing? And so we always try to redirect them and get them back to the process that it took. And I think that that's what this growth mindset is all about. Not so much the instant gratification, not so much, okay, I did it, but what did you learn throughout the process, and how did you change things? You know, how are you different now than you were going into this entire situation? So every time, you know, they always stop by or send us an email, and we, you know, we rejoice with them. But definitely, we always did it, but I think even more so over the past, since the semester started and we really kind of got into this book, just making sure that we refocus and make sure that they know that the process is what's important. And although it may take a lot of work, and you might have to repeat 0309, and you might have to repeat math 0310, but when you get out, you'll be a better person, and the whole process that you've been through and everything that you've learned throughout that should stick with you and serve you moving forward, as opposed to, oh, I just crammed for the test, or oh, I copied off someone's paper, oh, I just got lucky, you know. So we definitely try to just really refocus with that. I think this book really is in direct line with what we try to do with our particular students, and just making sure that they understand that although they may be coming into college with certain obstacles that maybe other students don't have, it doesn't mean that they can't be successful, and all they have to do is, again, get that growth mindset and turn that crystal and see that they are just as capable to succeed as any other person is.
All right, can we give it up for our panelists? Wow. Seriously, this is amazing. All right, so I just want to, we're just going to go through a series of questions, and this is for everybody, both panelists and folks in our audience. But I want to focus this one specifically on our audience. So just kind of hearing some of the experiences and the stories that our panelists shared. Does it bring up a specific scenario or a situation, or how does this really apply to the work that you do as you're either working directly with students? Maybe it's not directly with students, it's with colleagues, but any examples about how this shows up in your work? Deb.
I have a story to tell. In 2009, I had 30 years of service with the telephone company, and I got laid off. And I took a couple of QuickBooks classes in CE, and I did not want to register as a full-time student. I did not want to make that kind of commitment, because I was going to get a job just like that. And that's not what happened. Next thing I know, I'm in TRIO, I'm fully registered, and I can attest that program works. Strength Finders works, because that's how I develop my team. The end result is I graduated with 3.9 average. I'm ready to transfer into a 4-year program, and I feel like I'm a successful manager of the IT team here. And this is the impact that focused individuals with a good plan can make on somebody who just lost their entire livelihood. So, thank you all, because you've all had a part in it. I want to thank you.
Really?
I kind of want to add more of the opinion of David Birch about how our society award the dysfunctional fixed mindset. The problem I see that our students come here and does not want to challenge themselves because in the high school there's some population don't want to take AP class. Some student doesn't want to take AP class because the A&M and UT University of Texas take only 8%, top percent. And if you choose an AP course, you challenge yourself, a very difficult material, you will not be in that 8% in order to go to UT, in order to go to Texas A&M. And at the very beginning, when their mind start to develop and they learn a very painful experience, they want to challenge themselves, they want to embrace the challenge, they want to do better. But then they cannot get into the Texas A&M because they're not in the top of 8%. So they come to Lone Star and they say, oh no, I don't want to take that class anymore. I take the easy route. Because I learned from that, from my painful experience. That's one thing I want to support, I want to bring it up. And I have another story. We are Asian. And you know the general perception of the Asian parents, you have very fixed mindset. You are top A or you nothing. That's a very fixed mindset of the Asian parent. You have to be successful or you don't. You don't have anything in between. And in the competition that I went 2 years ago, there's a very high level competition, all state, for the people who, for the music student, they compete for all state. Only the top of the school can enter that competition. And I look around, I see like 95% is Asian. And then I say, okay, and it's happened in San Antonio, and the Asian parents, they never praise the kids in front of the kids. Maybe they're happy inside, but they never praise because they're afraid when praising them, they stop giving the effort. So they never praise anything. You didn't do good enough. You never do good enough for me. Because they're afraid that we say, oh, you're good, you're such a good, you do good in that test or something like that. They're afraid they will stop trying. And so I have a lady, she's a Chinese. Her son is 9th graders. 9th graders that enter that this teacher's competition is very rare. And besides that, he won. He become all-stater for clarinet. 9th graders. But in the competition, they have chair. First chair, second chair, third chair, fourth chair. He is 7th chair. But he's all-stater. And he come back and he sees his mom and said, Mom, I'm all-state. And the mom said that, which chair? Which position? He said, 7. Why are you not in the 2nd chair? And I think that the boy is very familiar with that kind of punishment. he's okay. He's okay. But then, and I say, how can you say that to your son? You should be very happy. You should be very proud of what he accomplished. But no. He said, why you not a second chair? But then later on, the same lady went behind a big collar in the room. There's a collar. She went behind that. She crying. She jumping. She very happy. But she does not show that in front of the kids. And I look at her and say, why do you have to do that for yourself and to your kids? And then, and I follow that story because the kid is in my daughter high school. I followed that kid. And the next year, the kids got second chair. So I kind of, I don't know, it's right or wrong, because I see that in front of my eyes.
So I think just a question, so how do we find the balance, right? The balance between encouraging effort and the reality of, like Yui mentioned. So there's still a specific score you have to get to be able to get into a UT or an A&M, and how do we find the balance between effort and, so the grades, we're not saying grades don't matter, right? So we can't just say that it's all about the process, because to get to the end result, there has to be some type of metric connected to that.
Well, I have a question to piggyback. Maybe I'm just saying the same thing that you're saying with
Right.
my phrasing. I don't want to, I tell my students, I'm not grading you on your effort, I'm grading on what you're turning into me. So while I appreciate the effort and I want to hear about your effort, I still have to grade the paper, the product that you submitted to me, which in some way it seems to contradict this mindset, but it can't. It can't. There's got to be a way that it doesn't contradict that mindset philosophy. So that was my question.
I don't think it does contradict, because when I was thinking about this last night, one of the things that I wrote is one of the issues is that students don't see the value in effort. A lot of times they haven't been taught to challenge themselves, and instead they have learned, kind of to piggyback off of what David said, we live in a shortcut society. So they have learned that the easy way out leads to success. So we have to teach them that there is no shortcut, right? So you actually do have to put in the effort to do it. So I found this video and I want to share this with y'all because I shared it with my students today, and it was on Mindset. It's 1 minute. You have to go look for it. And I'm going to paraphrase what it said. So it says, we all start at zero. And this was something that I never even thought about. We can't walk. We can't talk. We surely can't do algebra. Nobody is good at anything at first. There was a time when Einstein couldn't count to 10 and Shakespeare couldn't read. Growth mindset is knowing that you'll get it even if you haven't gotten it yet. And so one of the things that I told my students after that was, we did not know how to walk coming out of the womb, right? But what happens when a baby is learning to walk? When they fall, what do? And they say, well, they cry. But they get up. A kid, surely a 10-month-old, is not going to fall and say, oh, well, that's it, I can't walk, right? So we kind of have to go back into that infant stage and remember what it took for us to be successful. We all learned to walk, we all learned to talk, but that took a tremendous amount of practice. Kids have growth mindset. I mean, when you look at babies, they are not defeatists. They don't believe that if they don't get it the first time that they're never going to get it. And we have to remind our students, yeah, algebra might be hard at first, but you will get it in time if you're willing to put forth the effort. You will write a complete coherent sentence. It may not be a Shakespearean sentence. It may not be something Hemingway would write, but you can reach that goal if you are willing to put forth the effort. Now, if you want to shortcut everything, you're not going to reach that goal. There's no way that you can shortcut accomplishing a goal, but you will get there. It just takes time, and you can't, like Ava said earlier, you can't compare yourself to the next student because they may learn how to write a sentence 2 days before you learn, but it's not about what everyone else is doing, it's about you, right? Again, babies don't say, well, Tyler learned to walk 2 minutes before me. We just, you know what I mean? We have that in us when we're children, and somehow we lose that. And I think it's just reminding students. And when I showed them that video today, they were like, that's true. Einstein couldn't count to 10 and he was a mathematician, right? Shakespeare could not read at one point in his life, but he became a playwright. So I think it's reminding them of that and we all start in the same place, and those of us who put forth the effort get the results that we want.
And then they should take my class, because
There you go.
I will teach them about the structure of society, and part of it is learning the game that you're playing.
Right.
In some ways, these students should be more hardwired for that than we are, because they spend so much time playing video games, which is where a lot of this shortcut stuff comes from. A lot of the exposure to constant stimulation, that being directed always, or learning the rules to that game itself, but not the game of life. Because then obviously as parents have been saying the wrong stuff, you know, or praising them in the wrong way, whatever, when they're not on the video game. But the structure's still going to be there, even if we don't like it, David. And there's many things in this world, if we can teach them to know who they are, to love learning, and to figure it out, then it is a maze that they can get through, and they can get to those goals that they have. So.
This is also the same generation that is starting out playing fair, fun, positive soccer, which is something that I hate. I say this to my students all the time: life isn't fair, fun, positive soccer, baby. Sorry. And that's really hard. You know, I don't care how hard this kid works. This kid's over here picking his nose. They're all going to get the same amount of time to play, and that's really hard when you're.
When it's not realistic in life.
Absolutely.
It's not.
So it's really hard to break that pattern, because now they expect, well, it's my turn.
Right.
Oh, well, wait a minute. You didn't put the effort into it. Well, it's still my turn. That's really hard to correct.
No thoughts? Thoughts about finding the balance? All right, so let me ask this. For both panelists and our audience, so are there things you can do now to kind of put this into practice? So what are some of the things that you can do in your area, in your classrooms, to kind of put this growth mindset into practice? Taffy.
Take it to the high schools. I mean, that's our greatest audience. It's our greatest return on investment, I suppose. But taking it there, sharing that with especially those key players that we're able to connect with. A lot of times that's counselors, but our greatest success comes when we get to talk with teachers and get in the classrooms and that kind of thing. So starting that message there that, yeah, it's tough, but you know, it's all about the work, it's all about the process, and the success stories that come out of TRIO. I mean, those kinds of things are that's the examples to set before them in high schools, so that when they do come to our door, they're open to that discussion.
Others?
Yeah, I think Debbie's got the idea. When students come here, it's not that they're incapable of abstract thinking. It's just part of it is they're afraid of it, and the other part of it is they've never had any kind of real experience in abstract thinking. So when I present them with, okay, let's talk about the legislative branch of government, and I'm going to give you 4 models to think about the legislative branch of government, they freak out. No, hell no, don't give me 4 models. Because no, I want 1 model, and pick one, any one, and just give it to me. Because that's what's going to be on the test. And don't be messing around with these other models, just 1 will be sufficient.
They used to teach the test, that's all they do. Teachers teach the test, that's what they're used to.
So I refuse to just do the one. They have to look at a thing through at least 3 or 4 different lenses in order to recognize that whatever it is that we're framing, you can frame this in any way you want to. Just use your imagination. Come up with your own model and just do it however you want to do this, but justify for me. Don't just do it, you have to justify it as well, which puts the burden back on them. They actually have to now go, well, okay, fine, I just can't make it up. I actually got to show this guy that there's some substance to this as well. And
I just had the same thing happen. It wasn't, it was art appreciation, but it is the same thing. I gave them examples and said, okay, tell me about a painting that uses this and this, or a piece of artwork. 25 like, you know, they want to be spoon-fed, that the thought that they have to think about how to apply the information is beyond them. And I think that goes back to teaching the test.
Fortunately,
Yeah.
conceptually, we have to go back to an analytical approach to education. We have to step away from this spoon-fed test stuff.
Oh, agreed.
And in a society where we're overwhelmed with information, it's empirical that we look at analytical approach to education. I mean, we need to be able to analyze what we're being shown.
I think one of the small things faculty can do when we ask those questions, we get those 4 or 5 looks, it's just kind of, like, I'm very uncomfortable with silence in my classroom, but just to go ahead and sit there silently. Because I have a tendency, if I think the students are going to answer, I'm going to jump in and go ahead and, ask another question, rephrase it, or try to guide them towards the answer. And someone had told me a long time ago to sing Mary Had a Little Lamb in Her Head, and I'll sing it in my head. And sometimes I'll tell my students, so I'm going to sing Mary Had a Little Lamb, and sit quietly while you figure out what the answer is. I think we need to see some benefit in silence to give them the opportunity to think about it.
I did an observation today, and that was my one piece of feedback, which very much let me ask the question, 5 seconds later, no response, I'm going to move on to the next, as opposed to, you're right, giving them time to really think about, because you have some students who need to process, to internalize what you're saying, some need to jot it down. So I say that all the time, I'm completely okay with uneasy silence. And I'll sit here for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, as long as it takes for somebody to speak up. Right or wrong, right? But you're putting forth the effort to say something and to give us your opinion, because it's important. So we're here.
Go ahead.
I was just thinking about, people needing time to process. I want to go back to FFPS. And I have a certain disdain for FFPS too. I've been a coach for FFPS, but the philosophy behind FFPS, and maybe this helps to handle that problem of the balance, right? Because it's. I think the philosophy is a growth mindset, right? Even though it can get kind of namby-pamby, maybe that's where this could kind of empty out, and we have to be careful. But the idea that every kid gets lots of touches on the ball, that getting touches on the ball is what builds skill, that building skill is what gives you success on the field, right? And the idea came out of 5-man soccer in the streets of Brazil. Well, guess who had some of the best soccer players in the world? Right? It's these street kids. They're touching the ball thousands and thousands and thousands of times. They can dance that ball like crazy. Now, I don't see any suburban Texas kids doing that all the time, but that's the idea. Right? That's the idea.
It's like Gladwell's book, is it Outliers? It talks about 10,000 hours. Like, in order to become an expert at something, you have to spend 10,000 hours doing whatever it is. Like, focus specifically on it, not be alive for 10,000 hours, but dedicating 10,000 hours to that task, whether it's writing, whether it's playing soccer, whether it's playing baseball. So it goes back to effort, right? That you need to get those touches. You need that time to build that skill to be able to successfully do that work. Any other, Barbara?
I had a video quite a few years ago. Might still have it. I'm one of those savers, but anyway, it was a news story, and it was comparing the academic success of students in Japan versus the United States. And they showed this, it was high school, so they showed a math teacher come in, wrote the math problem on the board, and then left the classroom. And the students were supposed to work it out. And some of them worked on it individually, some of them worked on it cooperatively with other kids. But I don't know, at a certain given amount of time, the professor came back and the students had their answers. So they were left alone to think it through. And I think that we don't do that here. I think that they are spoon-fed. One of the things that really surprised me when I started working with students, with our at-risk students, was that a lot of them that were on probation or suspension were the smart kids. They were the kids who, you know, who were very bright, had good test scores. But in high school, they didn't have to study. They could cram the night before, just listen to the lectures, and then pass. So in working in counseling, working with the at-risk students, we have to try to help them understand that you know, you can't just slack and get what you want, achieve what you want to achieve. But I think listening to this, it's making me think that maybe we need to be even more intentional in helping them understand that it's not just that, well, that it's the effort, but it's also the process, that they have to enjoy the process.
So I was thinking about how to get student buy-in. Right? So we're talking about this here as a team of folks here at Lone Star College Tomball, but how do we get students bought in? I was thinking about just kind of the number of touches that we get. So we've heard that some students come to us, or a number of students come to us with this very fixed mindset based on what they've heard in the past. So I've been involved with Big Brothers Big Sisters for a really long time, and part of the requirements is that when you have a little brother, you have at least two outings a month. And one of the things that was so hard for me was I felt like I didn't have enough touch time to be able to change what he was hearing at home. So when I had him for 4 to 6 hours a day, 12 hours a month, all of the work that I was doing was being unraveled when I got home, or when he got home. So I'm saying, you can go to college, you're gonna be successful. He struggled with reading. So we would go to the library, grab books, and sit down and read, right? And we didn't go get ice cream, or we didn't go look at cars, or we didn't do anything fun until we spent at least an hour reading. And then I just thought about how all the work that I've done, I have to go back and do it again. And that is challenging, and that's overwhelming, especially for us who we deal with a number of students, and I'm sure we all have stories about students that we absolutely love and we want to be successful. So I say all that to say, how do we get their buy-in, especially when we're preaching one thing here and we only get an hour and a half, 3 hours, 6 hours of touch time here, and they go back home and mom says something, dad says something, grandma says something, husband says something that completely breaks down all the work that we've done. There's a question, sorry.
Well, you know, we don't have a society that's based on delayed gratification at all. So everything around you wants everything quick and easy too. I don't have an answer. I just know that it's going to be a big trouble.
Right.
Relationships. I think it's all about that you may try from the day semester starts till the day semester ends and not succeed at that relationship, but you don't know what seeds have been planted that will sprout later. You don't know, there's things I was told in my life I would be good at that I never dreamed of doing that I've done in my lifetime, and probably because one person said, you'd really be good at that. And so it's, I think if you're somewhere along the way that a relationship on a very small level, or maybe a very big one, like the mentor you were to this young man in Providence with Big Brothers, but to me that is so pivotal in what you're trying to accomplish in this.
No thoughts?
Hard work, that's something I'd like to ask you, because they seem to be resistant to that. That's the reality of
Or
this.
not knowing how to work hard.
Right. But no, they even hear the word. They think if it's not easy, then it's hard. Like it's the opposite thing, not like that there's a working it out kind of thing. And so that quitting too soon because they want it to be easy, that's going to be a challenge.
No thoughts?
Well, back, this has been a little ways. Herbert Simon, he went back and forth between sociology and political science, and he died in 2002. But Simon focused on on the decisions that human beings make and why they make the decisions. And Simon created a word called satisficing. And it's satisfy and suffice, and you put the two words together. And Simon argued that, and he defined the term as picking the first available expedient resolution to a problem. Well, okay, so I give my students essays, and I give the essays to them at the beginning of the semester, and I say, here they are. And these are the essays that we're going to build the course with. And so, with due dates. So, you know, we go through all of this build up, and then they have to actually write the essays. Well, in order to start writing the essays, they begin to most of them, not all of them, they immediately begin to satisfice. And they're looking for the hook that they can use to make this essay go away. So they look in the instructions and they see a minimum of 4 full pages. And they fixate on that word minimum. Well, it begins with an M, sort of looks like maximum. Hell, we'll just do this. So they immediately focus on the word minimum, and that is exactly what they give me. They won't go beyond that because they have met the minimum requirements. And so,
You can't penalize them.
so no, and okay, even if there are winners and losers that I'd like to, you can't, you go, well, okay, fine. But that's your entry, and they see the entry not as a means to an end. They see the minimum as the end. This is my goal. The minimum becomes my goal, and David just needs to go away and leave me alone because I just did give him what he wanted.
It's like they don't know that we don't live our lives shooting for the minimum, right? It's like, I had a student today, right? They turned in a paper. She didn't have the word count, so she undid all of her contractions. Yeah, it's like, she was confessing this as a slick, student-savvy move to her colleagues, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, right? So I'll have to remember that.
Yeah. We're laughing, but deep inside we're crying.
Painful.
Any other thoughts, comments? All right, a couple more things and then we can wrap it up. So we spent some time, actually a lot of time, talking specifically about students. So let's kind of transition to colleagues. So it would be our hope that all of our colleagues here at Lone Star College Tomball share this interest for helping students to get from, I say this all the time, from point A to point A and a half. Like, my job's not to reach from A to Z, but to reach from A to A and a half, and I feel like that I've done my job. And they aren't doing a book study on growth mindset, and they have a very, very fixed mindset as it relates to the students that we serve, whether it's preconceived notions, things that have been etched in who they are in the past. So what can we do, or what are some things that you all think we can do to kind of encourage and bring in more folks to really adopt this growth mindset? Because, you know, Van talked about models, right? Tuffy talked about relationships, and we're the models, and we're the ones that forge those relationships. Not saying that those peer relationships aren't valuable, right? But we're the ones that, for many of them, they look up to or they seek for advice. So how do we bring in folks and really get people to adopt this, you know, growth mindset where we want you to learn, we want you to get the experience, we want you to be, you know, successful, and we want this, you know, the story is more important than the outcome, right? So how do we get that, or has just as much value than the outcome, right? It's the steps you get there, and then
Jackie, with all due respect.
Are you about to yell at me?
No, I'm not. No.
Do I need to duck? Typically, people say, with all due respect, something's about to happen.
No, I'm singing Mary Had a Little Lamb up there. If you are here, and I've been teaching since 1985, it is extraordinarily easy to see a steady stream of students coming through your classes and eventually just become jaded by the whole experience. So, and it's not just jaded by the students, it's the next new thing. So during my career, I have been consistently confronted with the next new thing. So, okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is the new way of thinking, and this is the way we're all going to do it, and we're all going to read a book, and we're all going to talk about it, and we're all going to go out there and preach to the choir, and then we're going to get converts, and by God, okay, well, 6 months later, you know, all of a sudden, not so much, and we found a new sociologist or a new somebody, a psychologist from some other state, and so now we're off on this book. And what's embedded here, there are so many positives to what it is that we're talking about that I actually, it's a little disappointing to see the turnout here, and to see, not to see PSSA members here. I mean, that's great, and administrative staff and everyone else. What's disappointing is to see the lack of faculty response. Well, I'm not going to go out. I just spent 2 years as faculty senate president beating my head against the wall. I ain't doing that again. I'm taking a break. You two can do that. Right. Between you and Van, you guys go do that. I don't know how to reach people who are so entrenched and possibly jaded along the way. I got this much energy, and I don't.
I imagine if you're here, you already have a growth mindset. Okay.
And that was one of the things that
Here
I
with
was
the audience too.
going to bring up earlier about, what I've noticed is that it's not just students who have the fixed mindset, and we live in a culture where we want something for nothing, whether it's, cheating a little bit on our taxes, or or going to work and, you get paid a certain salary but not putting forth the effort to really earn that salary. I think it's not just our students, and I think that it's our society, and I think for our colleagues, we have to get them to buy into the fact that our students, we have to stop having fixed mindsets about who we are serving, and we have to be more open-minded about what it is that we do. We can't, I hate to say this, but we can't use purple worksheets. We have to be willing to be open-minded about what it is that we're doing, because students are evolving, our society is evolving, but if you are static, you are never going to get the change or the response that you're expecting to get. It's kind of like...
It's called moving the cheese.
Moving the cheese, right. You want your students to produce or to be a certain way, or we complain about what our students don't do, but we never sit back and look at, well, what could I do differently? How can I learn more about what it means to be a teacher, right? Just because I got my degree 25 years ago does not mean that I know everything that I need to know about being a teacher. Maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but that's just kind of what I feel.
Being a content expert doesn't mean you can teach.
Right. Or that you even care to
skill,
teach or care about people, or...
But in defense, we have a lot of Monday, Wednesday colleagues right now too. So if this was on Tuesday and Thursday, I wouldn't have been able to be in this panel.
Right.
So some of these things, I think our outreach efforts would need to, our colleagues would need to be on. We're all tired at the end of the day. It's hard to stay too long past that. But we need to offer this on a Tuesday, Thursday, so those people can, the Monday, Wednesday people might be coming or something like that. So, we might could get jaded again. It could still happen again, but at least we'd know we'd reached out.
Vanessa just volunteered for
No.
I teach Tuesday, Thursday.
Yeah, remember we're here because we teach Tuesday, Thursday.
I teach Monday, Wednesday, that's all it's like.
I teach Tuesday, Thursday.
So I think Robbie had moving the cheese.
I always tell students, or just individuals, period, think about the role that you played in the situation for the outcome that it is. So when you speak to the faculty side, or I speak to the staff side,
too complex. You know, we're not going to fix it sitting here in 2 hours. And I was late, I'm sorry, because I was in class as well. But, you know, we're not going to fix it, and it's a bigger problem than any of us here can fix or have time to fix or whatever. But I think the discussions are always good, because regardless of what anybody outside this room wants to do, it says that this group in here and the ones that are in class that would come if they could have, they are committed to that. And I don't think you just shut it all down and say, well, we only had 25 people show up, so nobody cares, so we're just not going to do that anymore. I think that you provide it, and those that come. What I think we can do as individuals I'm a problem solver, so don't be giving me a problem if you don't want a solution to it. You know, I don't like to sit and hash the problem. I want to sit and talk about all the solutions that are out there. And so sitting here and kind of thinking through all the things that were said, I think what we can do, okay, our colleagues are not here for one reason or another. You know, one of my colleagues is in Australia. She certainly would have been here had, you know, if she were not in Australia, somewhere else around the world. She was in Australia, and that's where she's still at. But you know, there are people that would be here if they could be here, and then there are people that are not going to come regardless, because they don't do this sort of thing, and they'll just say, I don't go to meetings, I don't go to that kind of stuff, I don't enjoy this sort of thing. But what we can do for both of those sets of people, those who would be here if they could, and those that are not coming regardless, that we are in our offices with or in our suites, if we go back and we have the discussions that are there. I know in our office suite, although we laugh and carry on and tell funny stories about our families and show pictures and, you know, whatever, we also have very serious discussions about things. So LaToya and I are in the same office suite, and I think we're the only two from our suite here for all the reasons that I gave. We have all great people, and they would be here, but ours are all actually in class. But LaToya and my responsibility then is to go back to our suite and at different times to bring it up and to talk about, you know, how we can and what was discussed here, to share with the other people in our suites or in your offices or your colleagues. And they may be interested, they may not be interested, they may come next time, they may not come next time. But if we want something that we can all take away from this, what can we do? You can share with the people that your colleagues that you work with, of what you learned, an idea you got, you know, something you thought about, you hadn't thought about in a long time, something funny, you know, David said, or whatever else you want to share. But I think a big component of it is now we take it back, and let's be the, you know, ministers that take it back to wherever we're going and share that with the people that we work with.
All right. All right. Good.
I'm always looking for presenters for Travel Lives. So I'm looking for next spring semester.
All right, well, in closing, I have a section here that said, so what's next? And it's a perfect transition from what Donna mentioned. So a couple things that we have happening. So we are, some of the wonderful folks on this panel are going to be leading a learning circle. If you'd like to raise your hands, just to let everybody know who's going to be leading.
Are you poking me?
Yeah. Yes, there we go. So there is a sign-in sheet in the back. So if you're interested in coming together with these two wonderful folks, in addition, I'm hoping some of the folks on this panel, and having a little bit more detailed conversation about the book Mindset and how this can be applied both in our classrooms and outside of our classrooms, I would definitely encourage you to sign up. There's a sheet back there in the back. The Faculty Staff Research Council is looking to do some type of research study around mindset. So we had a conversation last week about that. So I don't know if it's going to be, we're going to use the Carol Dweck instrument to do kind of a pre-test, post-test comparison. I think that's what we talked about in our meeting, and looking at some students maybe in a section of math or English. So that's something that we're going to be teasing through a little bit. And then lastly, as a result of the partnership with EDUC 1300 and Phi Theta Kappa, so we're doing a grit and mindset all throughout the semester. So there's a couple projects that we're doing. One that we just started with students from PTK are coming into class and sharing an experience about a time where they had to overcome an obstacle, and then we're giving extra credit. There's another event where students get a chance to write down their stories that we'll post across campus, and they're going to do another video. That has really gotten our minds working on the 1300 side about how we can customize the curriculum in 1300, because we typically, based on the mandate now, so we are the first touch kind of, like we have all students are required to take 1300. So what can we do curriculum-wise to really build in some of this mindset work? Because we teach it already. So we teach success, we teach motivation, we teach goals, we teach effort. So how can we be a little bit more thoughtful and a little bit more strategic in utilizing this book in the curriculum. So that's something that we'll be looking into, hopefully to implement in the spring, if not the spring, or fall semester. So any final comments or questions or thoughts before we wrap this session up a little early? Yes.
Well, I thought about, another way you could get this information out. Well, I don't know whether it would infringe upon the copyrights, but what if that little video that you showed in the beginning, this chart right here, because just this by itself, helps change the way that you think about things. What if that could run on the monitors on the campus, mixed in?
I will take that.
Is it on a Facebook page too?
I think we could do all of that. Shannon Marino.
That's the student life
That's a
page.
student. I'm sorry. That's right.
College Motivation
Yeah,
Monday.
college.
So I can totally do it on Instagram.
I think that's a good idea.
We have Motivation Monday. I usually put something about that. That'll work great.
Actually, when I saw that video, there's a lot of dead time, so to speak, for the students while they're waiting to get registered. If we could play something like that on the monitors, that might be helpful as well.
We can use like a poster, like one of those retractable posters. It's like,
For $295, you bought one.
oh.
So did we.
That's what I'm sort of whispering. Those are expensive. All right, maybe not. But thank you. Any other ideas? Any other ideas? All right, let's shut it down for us, Donna. All right. Thank you all. Good job, panelists.
I got you.
That was fantastic.
Fantastic.